Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey not into the heart of battle or the wild raids you've heard about a million times, but into the quiet, often overlooked currents that truly powered the Viking Age, their trade routes. We're going to push off from the shores of Norway, not with swords drawn, but with furs and amber packed tightly in the hold, ready to travel the forgotten waterways that connected Scandinavia to the rest of the known world. Imagine the creak of the timbers, the salty spray on your face, the rhythmic thump of the oars, and the vast, open sea stretching out before you. You're not a warrior, you're a merchant, a trader, maybe just an opportunistic sailor hoping to make a living. The sun is low, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple, and the longship glides silently through the water. It's a peaceful scene, one you probably won't survive given the dangers of the open sea back then. But for now, you are safe and sound in your bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the gentle rocking of the boat, a comforting rhythm that lulls you deeper into your pillows. Your longship, not a warship, is a nar, a wider, more stable vessel built for cargo. It's a workhorse of the sea, its belly filled with goods from your homeland. You're heading east, pushed by a crisp northern wind, charting a course toward the heart of the Baltic Sea. The cold air bites at your nose, but the thrill of the journey, of the potential profit, keeps you warm. You think about the simple, yet profound, act of exchange, a lump of resin from a tree for a piece of silver you've never seen before, a length of woolen cloth for a handful of spices. It's an economic system built on trust and necessity, and you are a tiny but crucial cog in its great machine. The mainstream historical fact is this: the Vikings' reputation as raiders is only one part of their story. They were equally, if not more, successful as merchants and explorers. Their trade network was vast and sophisticated, connecting lands from the frigid North Atlantic to the bustling markets of the Byzantine Empire. This commerce was a primary driver of their society's wealth and expansion. It was the promise of trade, of goods and riches, that often preceded the raids, or, in many cases, made the raids unnecessary. Their ships were the arteries of a new, globalized world. A quirky tidbit that might make you smile is the common use of eiderdown in trade. These were the incredibly soft, warm feathers from eider ducks, which the Vikings would carefully collect from nests without disturbing the birds. This wasn't just for warmth at home, it was a luxury good, highly prized in other parts of Europe. Imagine, the Vikings, known for their fierce image, also had a side gig as meticulous, ethical eiderdown harvesters. It was a trade that required patience and a gentle touch, a stark contrast to their more famous exploits. Historians still argue whether the transition from raiding to trading was a deliberate, strategic shift or a natural evolution. Did they consciously decide that commerce was more profitable and sustainable than plunder? Or did their initial forays as opportunistic raiders simply open up new avenues for trade that they couldn't ignore? It's a chicken and egg scenario. And as you drift on the waves, you can't help but wonder if the answer is a little bit of both. The sword and the scale. A hand in each, a journey defined by both. You close your eyes, letting the sound of the wind in the sails and the creak of the hull carry you. The journey is long, but the destination promises new faces, strange languages, and the glint of silver. You're not just sailing the sea, you're sailing the currents of history. And it's a much more peaceful voyage than you might have expected. The cold air feels a little less sharp now, and the rhythmic motion of the nar is a perfect cradle, rocking you further into sleep. The cold wind continues to push your nar eastward, and after many days of open water, you finally feel the distinct chill of the Baltic Sea air. It's different from the Atlantic, less raw and more biting, carrying the scent of pine and peat. Your mind wanders to the cargo you're after. Your own hold is filled with iron, wool, and perhaps a few hunting hawks. But the real prizes here in the eastern waters are much different. The water below you is a deep, murky green, and the shoreline is a blur of dark forests and low-lying, marshy islands. You're sailing into a new world, a different economic ecosystem. The waves lap softly against the hull, a gentle, hypnotic sound that carries you deeper into a state of drowsiness. You know the main currency here isn't just silver. It's also amber. This fossilized tree resin, washed ashore from ancient forests, was a commodity of immense value. You remember seeing it in your youth. Just a piece of golden brown stone. But in the markets here, it is a kind of silent gold. It's not just for jewelry, it was believed to have magical or medicinal properties. A mystical gem from the north. The demand for amber stretched far beyond Scandinavia, all the way to the Mediterranean and beyond. Your mind pictures the simple act of digging in the sand, hoping to unearth a piece of this ancient treasure. A small fortune waiting to be found. It's a testament to the fact that even in this harsh, unforgiving world, people found beauty and value in the most unexpected places. This area, with its network of rivers and coastlines, was also a major hub for one of the most brutal trades of the era, slaves. The Vikings didn't just capture and sell people, they were major players in an existing, sophisticated slave market that stretched across Europe. They would raid Slavic settlements, capture people, and transport them to be sold in places like the markets of the Byzantine Empire or the Islamic Caliphate. This is the grim reality of the Viking Age, a part of the trade network that is often glossed over. The very word, slave, might even derive from the Old French, sklave, which itself came from the Byzantine Greek, sklabos, a name for Slavic peoples who were so often enslaved. It's a dark, chilling thought, a reminder that the peaceful trading routes you're on had a deeply human cost. A mainstream historical fact you're well aware of is that the Baltic Sea became an absolutely crucial hub for this network. Major trading centers like Wolin and Trousseau grew into bustling, cosmopolitan cities where Norsemen, Slavs, and Frisians all mingled, haggling over prices and exchanging goods. These weren't just simple villages, they were proto-metropolises with complex economies and diverse populations. All built on the back of this burgeoning trade. They were the New Yorks and Shanghais of their day, drawing in people from across the known world in search of opportunity. Historians still argue whether the presence of these massive, multicultural trading hubs facilitated or exacerbated the slave trade. Did the established infrastructure and need for labor create a greater demand for slaves? Or was the trade a separate, darker enterprise that simply took advantage of the existing networks? It's a difficult question, a murky area where the lines between commerce and cruelty are terribly blurred. As you drift closer to the coast, you can almost hear the distant clamor of a market. The air grows heavier with the scent of wood smoke and the distant calls of gulls. You picture a massive, open-air marketplace, filled with strange faces and even stranger goods. The promise of profit is a powerful thing, a siren's call that draws you onward. It's easy to get lost in the romance of a journey, the feeling of the sea breeze and the vast sky. But the harsh reality of what you're about to encounter is always just beneath the surface. You close your eyes and let your ship carry you, a silent witness to a history far more complex than a simple tale of raiders. You're no longer on the open sea, but instead, you find yourself gliding up a wide, slow-moving river, the waterway a silver ribbon cutting through a dense, primeval forest. The rhythmic sound of the oars dipping and pulling is a much more intimate sound than the roar of the ocean. This is a different kind of journey, one that requires a deep knowledge of currents, portage, and the lay of the land. You've left the Baltic coast behind and are now pushing deeper into the great river systems that flow east. The trees on either side of the river are ancient, their branches reaching over the water, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. This river network, the waterways of the Rus, is the vital eastern artery of the Viking trade routes. It's here that the Norse traders, often called the Rus, carved out a path to the riches of the east. They weren't just sailing, they were hauling their ships over land. A process known as portage, to move from one river system to another. This was backbreaking, dangerous work, but it was the only way to reach the great southern rivers like the Dnieper and the Volga. The sound of 1,000 men dragging a fully loaded ship over slippery logs and rocky ground is a far cry from the peaceful lapping of waves. And you can almost feel the strain in your muscles just thinking about it. A mainstream historical fact is that the name, Russia, itself is believed to derive from the Rus, the Norsemen who established trading posts and, eventually, powerful states in the region. These Vikings didn't just pass through, they settled, intermarried, and became the ruling class over the local Slavic tribes. This wasn't a hostile takeover in every instance. It was a complex process of cultural exchange and political consolidation. The Vikings brought with them their organizational skills and trade networks. And in return, they adopted the language and customs of the people they now ruled. A quirky tidbit is the fascinating way they used their longships on these rivers. They weren't just for sailing, they were also mobile homes and trading posts. A small fleet could anchor at a strategic point, and the ships would effectively become a floating market, with goods displayed on the decks. Imagine a little village of longships, all tied together in the middle of a river, with people from different tribes and lands haggling and trading. It was a temporary, self-contained marketplace that could move at a moment's notice, a sort of ancient version of a pop-up shop. Historians still argue whether the Rus were primarily traders who became rulers, or if they were raiders who eventually settled down and established control. Was their initial intent to simply do business? And did the opportunities for power and land acquisition arise naturally from their dominance of the waterways? Or did they come with conquest in mind, using trade as a means to consolidate their power and influence? It's a debate about the very nature of their state building, a question of whether the scale came before the sword or vice versa. As you drift down the river, the landscape begins to change subtly. The forest recedes, and you see signs of human life, small fishing villages, smoke rising from a campfire. You are a long way from home, but you are not alone. You're part of a great, silent river of commerce, and every bend in the river promises a new encounter, a new opportunity. The gentle sway of the longship on the water feels like a lullaby, a perfect rhythm to carry you into a deep and peaceful sleep. You close your eyes, and the world outside fades, leaving only the sound of the water and the thought of the long journey ahead. The longship, having navigated the treacherous river systems, now rests at a bustling port. The air here is no longer just pine and peat, but a heady mix of exotic spices, distant cooking fires, and the rich, earthy scent of trade goods. You can hear the cacophony of a dozen different languages, a testament to the immense distances these trade routes covered. The people around you are not just fellow Norsemen, but also Slavs, Khazars, and even Arab merchants with their flowing robes and dark beards. Your journey has brought you to the crossroads of the world, and you are about to witness the economic engine that truly powered the Viking Age. The most sought-after commodity you encounter here isn't gold or jewels, but something far more practical and, in many ways, more powerful: silver. Specifically, silver in the form of coins, known as dirhams, that have flowed in from the vast and wealthy Abbasid Caliphate. The Caliphate, centered in modern-day Baghdad, was an economic superpower, and their coins were the gold standard of the medieval world. They didn't just trade with the Vikings, they were the source of the immense silver hoards that are still being unearthed in Scandinavia today. This isn't just about a few coins, we're talking about tons of silver. A constant stream of wealth that fueled the Viking economy. From the purchase of land to the funding of raids. A mainstream historical fact is that these silver dirhams, along with other Islamic goods, are a clear archaeological link between the Vikings and the Islamic world. The sheer number of these coins found in Viking hoards is staggering. It proves that the Viking network wasn't just a regional affair, it was a global enterprise connecting the far north with the bustling, sophisticated markets of the Middle East. The Vikings were not just looking to the west. Their most lucrative and consistent trade was to the east, along these great river roads. A quirky tidbit that you find particularly fascinating is how the Vikings actually used this silver. They weren't precious about keeping the coins whole. Instead, they would often hack the coins into smaller pieces, a practice known as hack silver. They would carry a small, portable set of scales and weights, and goods would be bought and sold based on the precise weight of these hacked-up silver fragments. Imagine a merchant, sitting on a log, carefully balancing a tiny scale to measure out a payment for a sack of furs. This system of weight-based currency was a genius solution to the problem of having a variety of different coins and a lack of standardized coinage of their own. It was a fluid, practical system that made trade efficient and simple. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for the Vikings' eastern expansion was the acquisition of this silver. Did they intentionally seek out the Caliphate's riches and establish trade routes specifically for this purpose? Or did the discovery of this lucrative source of wealth happen by chance as they explored the river systems? It's a debate about foresight versus opportunism. A question of whether the Vikings were master strategists or simply very good at seizing a good opportunity when it presented itself. As you close your eyes, the sounds of the market begin to fade. You can almost feel the smooth, cool weight of a silver dirham in your hand. Its intricate Arabic calligraphy a mystery you can't read. You are a long way from the cold fjords of your home. And the world has proven to be much larger and more interconnected than you ever imagined. The gentle rocking of the boat is a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of a fire and the knowledge that you are at the heart of a great, silent revolution in commerce. The sounds of the bustling river port begin to fade, replaced by the gentle hush of the night. You've seen the dirhams from the Abbasid Caliphate, felt their weight, and understand their importance, but your journey is far from over. You're now a small part of a larger, more intricate web. The goods that arrive here don't just stay put, they're traded, bartered, and moved along, flowing like the rivers themselves. As you settle down for the night, a fire crackling softly on the riverbank, you can't help but think about how far these goods have traveled and how much further they will go. You remember an old merchant, a grizzled old man with a squint in his eye, telling you about the goods he'd seen. Not just silver, but delicate fabrics, spices with scents you could barely imagine, and strange, colorful glass beads. These aren't from the local lands, they are the echoes of a different, more ancient trade network. They are the far-flung whispers of the Silk Roads. The Viking trade routes, particularly the eastern river systems, were in fact the westernmost fingers of this legendary network. It's a surprising connection, one that places the Vikings not just as a regional power, but as a key link in a global supply chain that stretched all the way to China. A mainstream historical fact you've come to learn is that the Vikings weren't just trading with the Islamic world. They were indirectly connected to the great empires of the East. The silver from the Caliphate, for instance, often wasn't just used for local trade. It was a currency that could be used to buy goods that had traveled from Persia and India, and even further east along the Silk Roads. The fine silks, intricate glassware, and precious stones that made their way to Viking lands weren't a direct result of a Norse-Chinese trade relationship, but a testament to a long and complex series of exchanges, where each merchant along the route took their cut and passed the goods along. A quirky tidbit that brings a smile to your sleepy face is the story of the Kufic coins, a type of Islamic silver coin that have been found in Viking burials. What makes this a bit odd is that some of these coins have been intentionally pierced and worn as pendants, and a few have been found with crudely carved runic symbols on them. It wasn't just about the economic value. These items held a certain exotic, even spiritual, allure. A piece of silver from a faraway land, with strange markings, became a personal adornment, a talisman. It's a small but powerful example of the cultural exchange that went hand in hand with the economic one. Historians still argue whether the Vikings were fully aware of the true origin of these luxury goods. Did they understand that the silk they were trading had come from China? Or was it simply an expensive and desirable commodity from the East? It's a question of their worldview and geographical knowledge. Was their map of the world a simple collection of known trade ports? Or did they have a broader understanding of the empires and lands that lay beyond their immediate contacts? As you drift off, you can imagine a Viking trader, a world-weary sailor, looking at a piece of silk and wondering about the distant, unseen land from which it came. The firelight flickers on the walls of your makeshift shelter, and the distant sounds of the camp lull you into a deep slumber. As the eastern markets, with their spices and silver, become a memory, the landscape around you changes again. The dense forests give way to a more desolate, frozen world. You're heading north now, following a different, but no less crucial, artery of the Viking trade network. The air is sharper here, and the sun hangs low in the sky, casting long, stark shadows across the snow-covered landscape. The rhythmic creaking of your longship is a constant companion, but the sounds of the world are muffled by the cold. This is the realm of the fur trade, a vital part of the Viking economy that connected them to the rich resources of the Arctic. You know that the demand for fine furs was insatiable. In the courts of Europe and the wealthy homes of the Caliphate, furs weren't just for warmth, they were a symbol of status and immense wealth. You're a merchant, and you know the value of a single, well-preserved pelt. The most sought after were the glossy black and silver pelts of the sable, the soft, ermine white of the stoat, and the thick, luxurious fur of the beaver. These animals, and the hunters who pursued them, were the backbone of this northern trade. A mainstream historical fact is that the demand for these furs drove Vikings deep into the hinterlands of modern-day Russia and Scandinavia, establishing a whole new set of trade relationships with the local indigenous peoples, such as the Sami and various Finnic tribes. These weren't just one-sided transactions. The Norsemen traded iron tools, weapons, and other manufactured goods for the valuable pelts. A quirky tidbit that you find interesting is that the Vikings also traded for a more unusual animal product: falconry birds. The gerfalcon, a large, powerful falcon native to the Arctic, was highly prized in the Middle East and Europe for the sport of falconry. These majestic birds were worth a fortune, often traded for several slaves or large amounts of silver. Imagine the scene: a Viking trader, a rough and ready man of the north, carefully transporting a hooded falcon, a quiet and deadly passenger, on a long journey south. It's a strange juxtaposition, the brutality of the longship and the delicate nature of the bird. But it speaks to the immense value placed on these birds. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' expansion into these northern territories was purely for economic reasons, driven by the demand for furs and falcons, or if it was also a form of land grabbing and political expansion. Did the allure of wealth lead them to peacefully establish trade relationships? Or did they use their military prowess to dominate the local peoples and monopolize the trade? It's a debate about the primary motivation behind their northern forays. And as you watch the snow drift down, you can see how both scenarios could be true. The wind whispers tales of both peaceful commerce and the clash of cultures in these frozen lands. The cold air begins to numb your face, and you pull your wool cloak tighter. The world outside is a silent, white expanse, and the only sounds are the creaks of the ship and the gentle lapping of the water against the hull. You are a long way from the warm, bustling markets of the south, but you are still a part of the same great, invisible web of commerce. The thought is a comforting one, a reminder that even in this desolate world, you are connected. The rhythmic motion of the boat is a perfect lullaby, and you close your eyes, the image of a majestic falcon in your mind, a symbol of the strange and wonderful things you have seen. You've left the frigid northern lands behind and are now sailing west. You're now once again on the open sea. The journey is long and the waves are rougher here. The wind a constant, howling presence. You think about the silver from the Caliphate, the furs from the north, and the amber from the Baltic. The trade network is a complex web, and you are a small thread, moving from one point to another, connecting disparate worlds. Your destination is now a place you've heard spoken of with a mix of awe and trepidation: Dublin, in what the Vikings called Dyflin. When you finally arrive, the sight is stunning. Dublin, at this time, is not a quiet Irish settlement, it's a bustling, thriving Viking port city, a hub of commerce and, more grimly, one of the most significant slave markets in all of Western Europe. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, salt, and the sounds of 1,000 different people, all shouting, haggling, and trading. This city was founded by Norsemen and became a powerhouse of trade. Its location on the eastern coast of Ireland making it a perfect gateway to the Atlantic and a central node for the trade of goods and people. The grim reality of the Viking trade network is on full display here. A mainstream historical fact is that the Vikings' arrival fundamentally transformed Dublin from a small settlement into a major international trading center. They didn't just raid, they settled, built fortifications, and established a political and economic base that would last for centuries. This city, and others like it in Ireland, became critical cogs in the Viking machine, linking the north and east to the west and the British Isles. The wealth flowing through this port wasn't just in material goods, it was also in human lives. A quirky tidbit is the sheer variety of people sold in the Dublin market. While the Irish were often victims of the slave trade, you could also find captives from Wales, Scotland, and even as far away as Spain. The Vikings were equal opportunity slavers, and their vast network meant they could transport people from across Europe to be sold in Dublin, and from there, to be shipped to other parts of the Viking world and beyond. It's a testament to the reach and efficiency of their network, a chilling thought that shows the dark side of their commercial prowess. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' settlement in places like Dublin was a result of a conscious plan to create trading hubs or if it was a more opportunistic process. Did they identify Dublin as a strategic location for trade and then settle? Or did their initial raiding activities in the area lead them to establish a permanent presence that then naturally grew into a trading center? It's a debate about foresight versus expediency. A question of whether the Vikings were empire builders or just very good at taking advantage of a good location. As you walk through the crowded market, the noise and the smells a constant assault on your senses. You can't help but feel the weight of this history. The cheerful clatter of coins and the friendly shouts of merchants hide a much darker reality. You close your eyes, and the sounds of the market begin to fade, replaced by the gentle hush of your own breath. The thought is a somber one, but it is a necessary part of this story. You are a witness to all of it, the good and the terribly bad. The memory of Dublin fades, and the sound of the sea returns. A constant, comforting rhythm. You're sailing back east now, navigating the cold waters of the North Sea. The journey is long, but your mind is already in your next destination. A name that echoes in the halls of Viking trade history, Birka. This is not a rough and tumble port like Dublin, but a sophisticated, well-established trading town in what is now Sweden. As you approach the shores of Lake Mälaren, the smell of wood smoke and the distant clamor of a bustling settlement greet you. A different kind of welcome than the wild shores of the Irish Sea. Birka is a jewel in the crown of the Viking trade network. A central hub where goods from all over the known world were bought, sold, and redistributed. You disembark and walk through the town. The narrow streets filled with merchants from far-flung lands. Here, you see the silver dirhams from the Caliphate, the furs from the northern forests, and the amber from the Baltic. All in one place. It is a true nexus. A place where the threads of the Viking trade network all came together. A mainstream historical fact is that Birka was one of the most important trading centers in Scandinavia from the 8th to the 10th centuries. Its strategic location on an island in a lake system gave it a natural defense and a central position for controlling trade in the Baltic. It wasn't just a market, it was a fortified town. A proto-city with a complex social structure and a diverse population. A quirky tidbit that you notice as you walk is the sheer variety of artifacts found here. Archaeologists have unearthed everything from Frankish glass beads to ceramic pots from the Slavic lands. And even a small Buddha amulet from India. A testament to the incredible reach of these trade routes. Imagine a Viking trader, a rough-hewn man from the north, wearing an amulet from a land he could barely conceive of. It's a beautiful and slightly absurd image. A perfect symbol of the cross-cultural pollination that trade enabled. It was an international town. A melting pot of cultures, ideas, and goods. Historians still argue whether Birka's eventual decline was due to a shift in trade routes, with the rise of other centers like Sigtuna, or if it was the result of political instability and conflict. Did a change in the flow of goods render the town obsolete? Or was it a victim of its own success? A prize too valuable not to be fought over? The answer is likely a complex mix of both. A reminder that even the most powerful trading centers are not immune to the forces of change. The wind whispers a tale of rise and fall, of a great city that once was, and is now just a memory. A collection of artifacts and burial mounds. You find a quiet spot on the shore, watching the longships come and go. Their sails a blur of motion against the gray sky. The town is a symphony of commerce. A constant hum of activity that is both energizing and deeply calming. You close your eyes, the sounds of the market blending into a single, continuous drone. A perfect backdrop for a peaceful slumber. You are at the heart of the Viking world. And for a moment, it feels like the whole world is right here with you. The gentle lapping of the water against the shore is a perfect rhythm. A final lullaby to carry you off to sleep. The bustling memory of Birka fades. And you're once again on a longship. But this time, the journey is different. The air is impossibly crisp. The water a deep, dark blue. And the land you approach is a stark, volcanic landscape. You're sailing far to the northwest. A long and arduous journey across the open Atlantic. And you've arrived at a place that feels both familiar and alien, Iceland. This isn't a trading hub in the same way as Birka or Dublin. But a new land, a new colony, and a crucial source of unique trade goods for the rest of the Viking world. You step ashore, And the ground beneath your feet is a mix of black volcanic sand and tough, windswept grass. The landscape is beautiful but harsh. A land of fire and ice. You see the geysers erupting in the distance and feel the warmth of the hot springs. A stark contrast to the cold wind whipping around you. This land, settled by the Vikings, quickly became a source of specialized goods that were highly sought after elsewhere. A mainstream historical fact is that while Iceland was settled by Norsemen, it developed its own unique economy centered around its very specific resources. They didn't have the same access to timber or iron as their counterparts in Scandinavia. But they had other, equally valuable things to offer. A quirky tidbit that you find fascinating is the trade in eiderdown and gerfalcons that we touched on earlier. But on a much grander scale, Iceland, with its vast nesting grounds and unique ecosystem, became a primary source for these luxury goods. The gerfalcon, in particular, was a major export. These powerful birds of prey, native to the Arctic, were highly prized by royalty and nobility across Europe and the Islamic world for the sport of falconry. It was a lucrative trade, and Iceland's remote location and unique ecosystem made it the perfect place to harvest them. Imagine a merchant, not with a hold full of furs or silver, but with a dozen hooded falcons, each one worth a small fortune. It's a very different kind of commerce, but a crucial one nonetheless. Historians still argue whether the settlement of Iceland was primarily motivated by a desire for new land and a release from political pressures at home, or if it was also a strategic move to secure these unique trade goods. Did the Vikings simply stumble upon these valuable resources? Or was the potential for trade a driving factor from the very beginning? It's a debate about the motivations for colonization, a question of whether the Vikings were looking for a fresh start or a new market. As you watch the steam rise from a distant geyser, the air smelling of sulfur, you can't help but think about the unique and strange journey that brought you here. The rhythmic roar of the wind is a fitting lullaby, a sound that is both wild and deeply peaceful. The volcanic landscape of Iceland slowly fades into a memory, and your longship, battered by the open ocean, is now a familiar cradle, rocking you gently to sleep. You've traveled far, but the stories you've heard, the whispered tales of journeys even further west, now fill your mind. You're sailing toward the setting sun, a direction that for most of history was a road to nowhere. But for the Vikings, was a path to a fabled land, a land they called Vinland. The air grows colder, and the waves become larger, a testament to the immense distance you're crossing. The journey is long and dangerous, and you can only wonder what awaits you at the end of it. You finally arrive at a coastline that looks nothing like the stark shores of Iceland. It's lush and green, with dense forests and a strange, sweet scent in the air. This is the land of Vinland, and the story here is a quieter one. A footnote in the grand saga of Viking trade, but a fascinating one nonetheless. A mainstream historical fact is that the Viking settlement in North America, while real, was small and short-lived. The archaeological site at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, is the only confirmed Viking settlement in the New World. It was a temporary base, likely used for exploring the area and gathering resources, not a permanent colony or a major trading hub. The trade that did occur here was on a much smaller, more personal scale. A quirky tidbit that you find particularly interesting is the nature of the trade with the local indigenous peoples, whom the Vikings called the Skrælings. According to the sagas, the Vikings traded with these people, exchanging goods like milk and cloth for furs. However, the trade was often fraught with tension, and the sagas describe a specific encounter where the Skrælings were captivated by the Vikings' iron weapons and tried to buy them. The Vikings, however, wisely refused, knowing the danger of arming a potential foe. This small, personal act of trade is a stark contrast to the massive, international markets of Dublin and Birka. It's a reminder that trade, at its heart, is a human act, and it can be as simple as a piece of milk-soaked cloth for a piece of animal fur. Historians still argue whether the primary reason for the abandonment of the Vinland settlement was hostile relations with the Skrælings, the immense distance and difficulty of the journey, or a lack of valuable, easily transportable trade goods that could justify the effort. Was it a military failure, an economic one, or just a logistical impossibility? It's a debate about the end of a grand adventure, a question of why the Vikings, who were so successful everywhere else, failed to establish a lasting presence here. The sweet scent of the forest fills your lungs. And you can almost feel the presence of a history that was almost but never quite was. The gentle rocking of the longship, a distant memory, is now a silent, peaceful presence in your mind. The taste of salt spray and the rocking of the ship are now a part of you. A constant, comforting presence. You've journeyed west to the edge of the known world and returned. And now your longship is pointed south. A long and arduous journey down the coasts of Europe. The air grows warmer, the sun brighter, and the seas less turbulent. You're leaving behind the cold, familiar north for a destination that is the stuff of legends. A city that was the center of an empire for over 1,000 years. You're sailing toward the heart of the Byzantine Empire. To a city the Vikings knew as Miklagard, the great city, which we know as Constantinople. This journey is the culmination of the eastern trade routes. The final destination for much of the silver and many of the slaves and furs you've seen traded along the way. Your ship is loaded not with loot from a raid, but with valuable goods. And you're a merchant, a diplomat, and a professional warrior all rolled into one. A mainstream historical fact is that the Vikings, particularly the Rus from the eastern trade routes, had a long and complex relationship with the Byzantine Empire. They traded with them, but they also served them. The most famous example is the Varangian Guard, an elite unit of the Byzantine Emperor's personal bodyguard made up almost entirely of Norsemen and other northern warriors. A quirky tidbit that you find particularly fascinating is the description of the Rus from a 10th century Arab diplomat, Ahmad ibn Fadlan. He describes them as tall as palm trees, with flaxen hair and a fondness for tattooing. He also notes their peculiar habit of meticulously cleaning themselves and their clothes, which was a marked contrast to the unhygienic practices of many other cultures at the time. It's a strange but compelling window into the cultural differences between the Viking world and the lands they visited. A reminder that they were seen as both powerful warriors and a little bit strange. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' service in the Varangian Guard was primarily an economic decision, a way to earn immense wealth and prestige, or if it was also a way to escape political strife and land disputes in their homelands. Did they seek out this service purely for the silver and the glory? Or was it a desperate attempt to find a new life for themselves in a faraway land? It's a debate about the motivations of these professional warriors, a question of whether they were mercenaries or exiles. As you sail closer to the great city, its towering walls and golden domes shimmering in the distance, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. This is the end of the line, the final destination for many of the stories you've heard. The gentle rocking of the ship is a final, peaceful lullaby before you reach the bustling, chaotic splendor of the great city. You have arrived. The great city of Constantinople is a blur of sights, sounds, and smells, and your mind is still processing the scale of it all. But even as you stand on solid ground, your thoughts drift back to the sea, to the thing that made this entire journey possible. It wasn't the strength of your arms or the courage in your heart, but the genius of the vessel that carried you. The longship, your home and your livelihood, was not just a boat, it was a marvel of naval engineering that changed the world. A mainstream historical fact is that the longship's design was revolutionary. It was a shallow draft vessel, meaning it could navigate not just the open ocean but also shallow coastal waters and, most importantly for the eastern routes, the great river systems. This versatility was its superpower. It could sail for long distances, be rowed when the winds died down, and was light enough to be carried over land, a feature that was absolutely critical for traversing the river systems of the Rus. The longship was the perfect tool for a people who needed to be both raiders and traders. A single vessel that could serve both purposes with equal efficiency. A quirky tidbit that you find particularly fascinating is the construction of the longship's hull. It was built using a method called clinker building, where the planks of the hull overlapped and were riveted together with iron nails. This gave the hull a flexibility that allowed it to twist and bend with the waves. A sort of built-in suspension system that made the ships incredibly seaworthy and resistant to the immense forces of the open ocean. Imagine a ship that could flex and move like a living thing, absorbing the shock of every wave, a silent testament to the skill of its builders. It's a detail that speaks to a profound understanding of the sea and the materials they used. Historians still argue whether the clinker-built longship was an original Viking invention or an evolution of a design borrowed from other seafaring cultures. Did the Vikings, in their isolation, develop this advanced technology on their own? Or did they learn it from the Frisians or the Anglo-Saxons and perfect it? It's a debate about the origins of innovation, a question of whether genius is born in a vacuum or is the result of cultural exchange and the slow, steady progress of humanity. As you close your eyes, you can almost hear the rhythmic creaking of the clinker-built hull, a sound that is both a memory and a promise of future journeys. The noise of the city fades, and the sound of the sea returns, a constant, comforting presence that lulls you into a deep and peaceful sleep. The sheer scale of Constantinople and the genius of the longship now feel like distant dreams. You're back in the quiet, methodical world of commerce. The roar of the city is a distant echo, replaced by the soft chink of metal on metal, a sound that is as important to the Viking Age as the clash of swords. You're in a market now, but not a large, bustling one. This is a quieter, more intimate exchange, a single merchant with a small, yet powerful, set of tools. You remember a fellow trader telling you about this, and now you see it in action. A mainstream historical fact is that the Viking economy was based on a silver weight standard, not on standardized coinage. The silver dirhams from the caliphate, as well as Roman and Byzantine coins and hacked-up pieces of jewelry and ingots, were all a form of currency. What mattered was not the image on the coin, but the precise weight and purity of the silver itself. To facilitate this, the Vikings used tiny, exquisitely crafted weighing scales. These were not large, cumbersome things, but small, portable devices, often folding up into a small, elegant box that a merchant could carry with them at all times. This system of hacked silver and portable scales was a genius solution to a lack of a central government-issued currency. A quirky tidbit that you find particularly fascinating is the variety of small, often beautiful, weights that were used with these scales. These weights weren't just simple lumps of lead or stone. They were often intricately decorated, made of bronze, lead, or even glass, and shaped like animals, human faces, or abstract designs. A merchant's set of weights was as much a personal statement as a tool of the trade. Imagine the quiet pride of a merchant, carefully setting a tiny, bronze-cast duck onto a scale to measure out a payment. These small details paint a picture of a culture that found beauty and art in even the most mundane of objects. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of hacked silver and weight-based currency was a sign of a sophisticated and adaptable economic system or an indicator of a lack of political unity and centralized authority. Was this a clever innovation born of necessity? Or was it a sign that the Vikings were still too decentralized to establish their own standardized coinage? It's a debate about the nature of their society, a question of whether their economic system was a source of strength or a symptom of their political weaknesses. The soft chink of the scales and the careful placement of the weights is a peaceful, rhythmic sound, a lullaby of commerce that lulls you into a deep slumber. The clinking of scales and the careful exchange of hacked silver now feel like the distant past. Your mind, refreshed by the sleep of commerce, now turns to a question that has haunted your journey from the beginning: the relationship between raiding and trading. You've seen both sides of the coin, the peaceful exchange of goods in Burka and the grim reality of the slave markets in Dublin. But were these two activities separate? Or were they two sides of the same coin, inextricably linked? A mainstream historical fact is that Viking raiding and trading were often not mutually exclusive activities. In many cases, raiding would precede the establishment of a peaceful trade relationship. A successful raid on a settlement could establish the Vikings' power and influence, making a subsequent trade agreement much more palatable for the locals. It was a brutal form of negotiation. First you demonstrate your strength with the sword. Then you offer the scale. The raids also provided an initial source of wealth, a stockpile of goods and precious metals that could be used to kickstart their own trade networks. It was a vicious cycle of violence and commerce. A quirky tidbit that you find particularly fascinating is the concept of a tribute, or Danegeld. This was a tax or protection money paid to the Vikings by various European rulers to prevent them from raiding. But the money, often in the form of silver, didn't just disappear. It entered the Viking economy. It was melted down, hacked up, and used as currency. fueling the very trade network that the Vikings used to conduct their business. In a strange, circular way, the protection money paid to prevent raiding often ended up funding the very ships and expeditions that would carry out more raids. It's a paradox of power and commerce. A system that was both a symptom of instability and a driver of economic growth. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' raiding was a primary economic strategy or a temporary phase that eventually gave way to a more stable, peaceful trading economy. Did they always intend to establish permanent trading centers, using raiding as a short-term solution? Or was raiding simply an opportunistic way of life that evolved into something more sustainable? It's a debate about the nature of their expansion. A question of whether they were pirates who learned to be merchants or merchants who weren't afraid to be pirates. As you lie still, the gentle sound of your own breathing is a quiet backdrop to these larger, more complex questions. The journey is almost at an end, but the lessons of it are just beginning to sink in. The longship, the scales, the silver, the raids, all of it is a tapestry that now feels complete. A grand story you've lived through in the quiet of your mind. But like all stories, this one has an end. The Viking trade era, this grand, complex network of rivers, oceans, and people, did not last forever. It was a product of its time, and the world was changing around it. Slowly, inexorably, in ways that would eventually make the Viking way of life obsolete. You feel the final, gentle rocking of the boat, and you know this is the last leg of the journey. A mainstream historical fact is that the decline of the Viking trade network was a gradual process, driven by several key factors. The conversion of Scandinavia to Christianity was a major one. As Viking kings adopted the new religion, their societies became more centralized and integrated into the broader European political landscape. Raiding, and the chaos it created, became less of a viable strategy and more of a political liability. The focus shifted from opportunistic plunder to state building and formal alliances. The church, with its own vast network of monasteries and trade routes, also began to play a larger role in shaping the economy. A quirky tidbit that you find interesting is the rise of a new type of merchant, the Hanseatic League. This powerful federation of northern European trading guilds eventually came to dominate the Baltic Sea trade, effectively pushing the Vikings out of their own backyard. The Hanseatic merchants were ruthless and efficient, and they established a new, more formalized system of commerce with permanent trading posts and a focus on long-term contracts. The Viking way of doing business, with its mix of raiding, trading, and decentralized power, simply couldn't compete with the organized, institutional power of the Hanseatic League. It was a classic case of an older, more chaotic system being replaced by a more stable, professional one. Historians still argue whether the end of the Viking Age was a result of internal changes, such as the rise of centralized monarchies and Christianity, or external pressures from new economic and military powers like the Hanseatic League and the emerging nation-states of Europe. Did the Vikings change because they wanted to, or because they had to? It's a debate about the primary cause of the end of a great era. A question of whether their downfall came from within or without. The journey is over. You've traveled the rivers and the seas, seen the markets and the battlefields, and understood the complex, contradictory nature of the Viking world. The final image in your mind is not a roaring warrior or a bustling market, but a quiet harbor, the longships now resting, their sails furled, their purpose changed. The world is moving on, and you are a part of that slow, inevitable transition. You close your eyes, the last thought of the day a calming, peaceful image of a world at rest. The gentle rocking of the boat, a constant companion throughout the journey, is now a distant whisper, fading away as you drift into a deep and peaceful sleep. And now, as the final ship sails into the quiet harbor of your mind, the great journey comes to a peaceful close. The sounds of the sea, the shouts of the merchants, the clang of the scales, all of it is fading now. A soft, pleasant memory, the stories of the Viking world, with its grand adventures and quiet moments of commerce, are now a part of the stillness. You are safe and warm, and there is no need to worry about the longships, the raids, or the treacherous rivers. The past is where it belongs, a beautiful and complex thing that you can now let go of. Like a gentle breath released into the night, just settle deeper into your bed. Let the weight of the day lift from your shoulders, And allow your body to feel heavy and peaceful. The rhythm of your own breathing is the only sound you need to hear now. A soft and steady beat that carries you away. The darkness is a soft blanket. A place of rest and quiet. And you are completely, totally, and utterly safe.